Hello everyone. Today we will go through some logging practices that my team has been using for some time and we would like to share them with you. So make some coffee and get comfortable. This video will be part of general .NET Core tips and tricks videos, so subscribe to the channel not to miss anything in the future. I will start with the obvious. It's fundamental for any application that runs in development, moreover in production, to log information about how it operates. And yeah, the default logging to console is useful when you are developing and running the app locally, but obviously becomes useless when running the app somewhere on a server. In this video, I will show you how you can set up logging to send data over to a log management solution, namely SEQ, and create some dashboards, widgets there that will let you monitor your application in runtime. This is the initial video of the series, so we will cover just the basics for now. An in-depth video on log management solutions will come sometime later this year. So let's get to it. Now we will go over some practices that my team has been following for some time. First one is use a standard library or SDK for logging, aka don't reinvent the wheel. Using a standard, well-documented library will help the guys from operations integrate your solution into their existing infrastructure. Our case, we are using Serilog, which is a .NET Core third-party open-source library. It is simple to set up in your application and overrides the built-in Microsoft logging. It is structured logging oriented and has a decent documentation and a lot of things where you can send data. What are the Serilog things? Well, those are just ready to use integrations to send data over to different tools, platforms, storages. If you go to the official page of Serilog, you could see here a link to the provided things. As you can see, there are a bunch of provided things, starting with the console, going to Amazon CloudWatch, Azure Analytics, Elasticsearch, Graylog, etc. etc. We are going to use the one for SEQ, which is this one. So what is SEQ? SEQ is a centralized storage that we are going to use for our logs. It's a log management solution, so we will be able to query, go through the data that we have stored, create some dashboards, as well as send some alerts in case we need to do that. Other than that, yeah, here you can see a couple of dashboards that you could create. We'll go over some simple samples later in the video. As well, you can send alerts and integrate different platforms like Slack, Teams notifications, etc. etc. The next tip that I could give you is basically make your logging setup externally configurable. Serilog does that via the Serilog settings app settings package. How it works out is basically you can specify how you want your logging to work in the app settings.json file. Namely, here you can see that we are using a sync for SEQ and a sync for the console. We are specifying the minimum log level, and we are enriching our logs with data from the log context, threads, processes, environment. As well, you could add different properties that you might want, for example, the environment from which the request came from. The other part, besides the NuGet package, you would need to initiate your logging by using these two lines of code. So basically you would configure your Serilog to take the configuration from the JSON file. Why we would need that? Basically you could have different logging parameters, logging setups for different environments. One for development, one for staging or quality assurance, and one for production. This would enable the guys from infrastructure set up different logging parameters for different environments. These parameters can be changed from a CI/CD pipeline or manually. Next tip is basically use a proper log level for the information. So basically we are using trace level for detailed messages with sensitive app data, debug, useful logs for development environment, information, just general messages, warnings, unexpected events that can be gracefully handled by the code, errors, general exceptions and failures, and critical logs are basically failures that require immediate attention. In general, keep the structure of the logs consistent across different applications. This will make it easier for the guys from infrastructure to set up dashboards on their end. We are using structured logs. What that is basically you are structuring your log information into a template that you could use later and query it inside the log management solution and create alerts, widgets based on different values. You would provide inside the string and code for a specific value and later use this code for your queries. An example would be our request performance middleware. This is a proof of concept for what you might have in your applications. For example, in here we are starting and stopping a stopwatch, and if the time for a request went over 200 seconds, we would log a warning with an error code of a long-running request, the request path, and how much time it would take. So yeah, I've set up a small API method that would do exactly just that. So if we go to our Swagger UI over here, we could run a long-running request. It would return us a 200, and now we could go over to dashboard in SEQ, for example, refresh it for a second in here, and we see that we have a request on the path of long run that took more than 200 milliseconds. If we go over to the events, here we could see the other information that we have in place. So it took us 516 milliseconds. The environment is development. This value comes from the app settings. The error code is long-running request. Basically, in the future, we could just use different error codes for different dashboard widgets, the request path, etc., etc. Basically, keeping the error codes and the structure for your logs consistent across different applications will make it easier and feel more familiar, not only for the guys from the DevOps team or from the infrastructure team to set up dashboards, etc., etc., even for developers that are coming from other projects, from other teams, and try to integrate into your team. At least logging will feel similar or familiar to them. One other tip that I could give you is to expect your logs to be read out of context. Basically, it would be good of you to attach context information as well as probably some remediation steps to the logs so that the person that reads them out of context of execution can understand where the issue is and how it can be solved. You should focus on explaining the purpose of the operation or the outcome. Basically, do anything that when reading this log message out of context, the reader could understand what the hell went wrong in there. So for this, you could use the enrichers that we've previously discussed. So besides this four, there are a bunch of other enrichers. You could also set up properties for your solution. Yeah. This would be a perfect example of including the user ID at the beginning of a request and then having it inside all the log statements of that specific flow that the user triggered. So afterwards, you could query the data for that one specific user ID and see what went wrong there. Now for the widgets that you could set up and how you could do that is very straightforward and very elastic, let's say so. SEQ supports SQL style queries, so you could set up a query like this. So for example, count how many requests have been hit and where the error code is a long-running request, and group those by a request path. This would be the query that is generated, so yeah, you could use it inside the events tab, just query data over there. The style of the widget, so the default palette, the type of the widget. For example, right now I'm using a table widget. You could use as well a chart, line chart, pie chart, point, etc, etc. You could specify the position on the dashboard, and you can set up different alerts for the widget themselves. If you want to run SEQ on an ARM based processor on MacBook, for example, I'll add the Docker image and the Docker command that I've been using to start it up inside the description part of the video.